People say, well, how do you do what you do? I mean, it's in all of us. You know, the most fun we had as kids was when we played dress up and pretended, and we could be anything we wanted. They call it a play. They call it a screenplay. You say, I play a role. It's always play. And it's that little kid inside of you, only now you have the best costume designers and the best makeup and the best scripts, and it's all like at a huge, heightened reality. That's what I love about it. Hi, this is Kathy Bates, and this is the timeline of my career.
I was born into a world full of angels and kings.
The first film role that I had was with Milos Forman, his first American film called Taking Off. And I taught myself how to play the guitar when I was 12. My mom bought me an old Silvertone for $20 at Sears, and I ended up writing a song about loss of innocence when I was around 16. And then when I got to New York, through friends, I met Milos. My song was featured. Carly Simon's song was featured. It was really cool. We got paid $5 a day, and I don't think SAG knew about any of that. I loved acting in high school, and I was very serious about acting on stage. I wasn't particularly focused on being in film. The whole working with Milos was a real accident for me.
Hello, Max.
Hi, Selma.
You didn't bring any beer, did you?
No? Was I supposed to?
I got it.
Good.
Warren Beatty saw Vanities, which was a play we did off-Broadway, and he told his buddy Dustin Hoffman about me. We were all at Dustin's house. There was a scene where we were supposed to talk through a screen door. I don't know where he got the screen door, but he was holding the screen door in between us, and we did the scene together, and he really liked some of the things that I did, and he cast me in the role right then and there. And I remember saying to him, can I call my mother? Is this really happening? And he said, yeah. And I'll always be so fond of Dustin because he's just an actor's actor. He literally took me by the hand and walked me across this empty soundstage and said, that's the camera. And he was totally serious about it. He was so excited, I think, for me as an actor having this first speaking role. I learned so much from him. I had followed his movies. He was so passionate and so excited still to be an actor. I feel so fortunate that that was my first speaking role, working with someone as talented and as committed as Dustin. But the other really cool thing is that they were trying to cast a kid to play our son, and Gary Busey's kid, Jake, decided, they asked him if he would consider doing it, and he was 5. He said he had to think about it. And so the next day, Gary came in with Jake, and he said Jake had said to him, well, I guess acting is like pretending, but making believe like you're not pretending. And we all thought, that's it. That's the bottom line. All the actor classes can just learn this one thing.
Shh, darling. Trust me.
God's sake.
It's for the best.
Eddie, please!
So still very much involved in theater when I moved out to LA, and I did a production of Aunt Dan and Lemon. But Rob Reiner was dating Elizabeth McGovern, who was in the play, and he would come almost every night and bring her roses. And he saw me playing this fanatic. And I think he had seen me in plays in New York, too. So when it came time to cast Misery, I think they were interested in Bette Midler and certain names, to play this character. And then they decided maybe it was better to go with somebody who was really unknown. So I went in, and it was similar to being cast in Straight Time in that, I came into Rob's office and sat down, read a scene or two with him, and then he cast me. And I said, can I call my mother? It's like, he said, yeah, you can call your mother. And it was really hard to find a guy who wanted to be in that vulnerable position. But he tried everybody. He tried Redford. He tried, Beatty at one time was going to do it. Finally, Jimmy said, yeah, it was the worst thing you could have asked Jimmy Caan to do because he hates not moving. He knows every sport in the world. He hated being in bed. Also, I have to confess, sometimes you have to look really, really close to the lens, and the other actor can't see you. And I had a crush on the operator. So sometimes Jimmy was like, "Is this okay, Jimmy? You can wait this one out, and I'd be looking at Todd, beautiful blue eyes, and I could play Annie and stuff with him. The other great thing about doing Misery was I got a really beautiful trailer. It was powder blue inside, and I got in and I sat there for about 20 minutes, and I thought, well, this is really lonely. Why am I, what am I going to do in here by myself? So I hung out on set with everybody. And by then, Rob had a fantastic crew of people, people he'd worked with for years who were creme de la creme. I learned so much just hanging out, and besides flirting with Todd. I remember working with Tony Serrano. He was the man's costumer. He was working with Jimmy. And we were just passing each other on the soundstage, and he just threw over his shoulder. He said, "Get your Oscar dress ready." And I was like, because again, I wasn't thinking, I just wanted to be the best I could be.
I'd like to thank the Academy. I've been waiting a long time to say that.
What often happens after someone wins an Academy Award is you never work again. Because I guess they feel like, you're terrific, stamp of approval, now we can move on to somebody else. So it was hard for me for a while to find roles that weren't horror roles, and just what was I gonna do next? And so it took me a while. I was in Japan. I was publicizing Misery and getting over jet lag and all that. And I got this script, Fried Green Tomatoes, to read. I read it and I thought it was great. I had read Fanny Flagg's book. It was very brave of Fanny to write Fried Green Tomatoes way back then because of the prejudice against lesbians. I think even in the film, it's more suggested. It's not really spelled out. So that drew me to it, that kind of bravery and the relationship between those two lovely women, how fierce Iggy was in fighting for her friend. I'd like to go back and do some of those early scenes. It was hard for me to get a hold of the kind of, the naivete and the Southern woman who's grown up in the South that I grew up, but the South that I ran away from. Thank God I was working with Jessica Tandy. Working with her was amazing because you could see how her craft was a life force in her. She was 84 at the time, and I felt like my own light was kind of going out inside, and I don't know why, but I remember knocking on her trailer one day, and she opened it and she said, "Oh, you've come to see the wise woman."
I spent the day with the people at the bank. Turns out you weren't supposed to do that. Lie to them, make them break their rules.
What? What are you going to do?
I got all that money given right back to me in cash.
Dolores Clayburn was a novella by Stephen King that Taylor Hackford directed. I loved working on that film because Taylor gave me every tool that I needed to create that character. You see her when she's in her 40s, and then later on when she's at the end of this very hard life in her 60s. I had a fantastic movement coach because we wanted to figure out the difference in the spine, the difference in the hands, the difference in the movement in a younger woman and a woman who's been on her knees taking care of things. And also, I know from getting older that because you're used to doing things, you have a shorthand when you're cooking or doing, well, I don't cook, but we wanted that. We wanted the difference in the hands. It was what I had studied to do, was create a whole character like that. It was an amazing experience to work together on all of this, and we had a good long time to do it. And in Nova Scotia, oh, it's so beautiful. We were so cold when we got there, and then it just this incredible spring and summer, and it was just an amazing time that I'll just never forget.
I don't understand a one of you. What's the matter with you? It's your men out there!
The role in Titanic was just a gift. Once again, we had training. We had a woman who literally taught us how to use our silverware and how to move as the ladies and how to put our napkins on our laps.
Eyes of God, she belongs to Thomas Adler.
It's all for me.
Start from the outside and work your way in.
Jim Cameron, he's a genius. He had gone down in this submersible. I think he'd been down to the Titanic, the real Titanic, 3 times. And it takes about 2.5 hours to really sink all the way down there, which would, he also created the Snoop Dogg that went in through the different holes in the ship. And a lot of what you see in the film, the doll, the glasses, is what he photographed. I remember going down to Baja, he built a studio. He built a 7/8 replica of the Titanic. I remember, because we'd have to go up inside the ship to do the promenade. So that was on the other side, because they wanted to see the ocean in the background. So I went up in this elevator, walked across some planks, and I opened this door, and I saw people strolling, and it was suddenly 1912. Everybody was in Deborah Scott's amazing costumes. She got costumes from all over the world, like 4,000 vintage costumes. And I couldn't see anything else but these people who were the background, who were walking up and down, and I thought, holy crap, I feel like I've just walked into another time, another place. It was on hydraulics. So he flooded the whole damn thing. It was just astounding what he did. And it was also maddening because the ship went down at night, so it was all night shoots. So you'd get there at 5 and get all suited up, and then you'd sit there in your dressing room until they called you at like 3 in the morning. And I don't know how Kate and Leo did that. They were working so hard, and they were pushing their calls. They were working in cold water, and it was an amazing experience. Paramount and Fox had to come together to create this magnificent opus, and there were a lot of us who felt like, I don't know if this is going to work, and he ended up winning all of those Academy Awards, and I feel very honored to have been in that film.
I will not let you f*** up this campaign, too. I will not let it happen.
That was 20 years ago.
Yes, I was thinner then. I had a waist.
In 1998, Mike Nichols cast me in primary colors with John Travolta, Emma Thompson, Billy Bob Thornton, amazing group of people that was really based on Bill Clinton. I couldn't believe I was working with him. He would tell us stories the first time we got around the table, because he wanted to tell us what it was like to be part of that group and that, that kind of political group. And he had some amazing stories to tell us, like he was there the night that Marilyn Monroe was in the garden and sang Happy Birthday to JFK, and hearing Bobby Kennedy and Marilyn talking to each other as they were dancing later, and hearing Marilyn say, "I really like you, Bobby," and hearing Bobby say, "I really like you too, Marilyn." And he would just have all these amazing stories, and there was just nobody like him. I think the best directors are the ones who can play all of the characters deep down to their marrow. That's how they help you if you're not there yet or you haven't thought of it. He knew everything about Libby Holden. He was so loving. I remember we were just about to finish, and I was getting an opportunity to direct my first time, and so I was very shy. I said, what kind of advice can you give me, Mike? And he said, even though I'm an actor, I'm kind of nervous about directing other actors because, when you work with other actors, you're never supposed to say anything about what they're doing. That's the director's job. And he said, love them. Just love them. And he was right.
Foosball? You playing the foosball behind my back?
The only reason I'm doing this so I can go to school.
School?
I remember picking up this script, The Waterboy, and I read the first 12 pages. It was really silly. It was a football movie, and I thought, and I threw it in the trash. And my niece, who worked with me and still does, came in and said, "What is this?" And I said, "I don't know. It's some movie by some kid, Adam Sandler." And she just exploded. And she said, "Adam Sandler, you don't know the Hanukkah song? You don't know Santa?" So she said, "You've got to do this. You've got to do this." And I said, "Okay, let me read it again." And I still was kind of doubtful. I didn't know what to expect. And then suddenly, we were down shooting in Orlando with Sandler and his crew and Henry Winkler. It was just suddenly, it's that play again. It was just I don't know how to explain it. It's just somewhere a character just comes out. And she was such a fun person to play. Because one of the things that I think is my Achilles heel, both as a person and as an actor, I take things way too seriously. This was an opportunity to just let it all hang out and just play and be silly, and it turned out to be one of the most wonderful experiences of my whole life. I felt so free, I could do anything. I looked at a couple of clips the other day and I thought, oh my God, those gel alligators, that Fairuza had to eat, oh my God. And it was just, it was so much fun. It really was. It had very fond memories. And I remember they made $34 million the first weekend, and that was way back then. And Adam said, what happened? I can't believe this. This is amazing, and it was, he's a good egg.
I never stressed it, but they were often very trying people to deal with, in many ways.
Another role that came my way was Revolutionary Road. It's an incredible book, which I recommend. And it was exciting for me to reunite with Kate and Leo. I think it'd been 10 years since I'd seen them after Titanic. I remember we were all at the table, and Sam Mendes, this magnificent director, so excited. I had met with him at this hotel, and I kept asking him, is the part mine, really? I mean, I couldn't, grasp that. We were in New York, we were rehearsing, and I said, who's playing my son? This guy who's this psychotic, crazy guy. They said, this guy named Michael Shannon. And he said, you want to see his audition tape? And we all said, yeah, we want to see it. And we went on and sat down on the sofa, and he ran this tape, and we were like, and I just said, yikes, this guy. And from behind me, Kate said something like, okay, we're all gonna have to work a lot harder.
John, please.
Steady down, son.
The other thing that I loved about meeting Michael and working with him, another very different kind of actor in terms of his approach, was seeing how Leo had come into his power as an actor. And there was one scene where he's really attacking us, and he filled that whole room with his rage. And I thought, wow, to see an actor go from this boy, innocent, to this powerful man, this powerful actor, was just astounding. And I was so thrilled for him, and to be able to be there to witness it. And working with Kate and shooting in Connecticut, and it was wonderful. It was one of those special times in my career that I'll always, again, they're just a handful that you feel, and I don't want to cast aspersions on anybody else. I've had a half a century, a wonderful career, but there's a handful of films that, if you're lucky, are the ones that you feel most proud of.
For new jobs and new opportunity and new security for the middle class.
Oh Lord, my God, have you forsaken this once proud country?
In 2012, I was doing a television show named Harry's Law, and we were canceled. That was a real sock in the gut. And I wasn't physically in good shape. I let myself go. I had been in an unhappy relationship, and I just didn't care anymore. So it was an emotionally difficult time for me. I had been getting pains in my abdomen, and I'd had ovarian cancer in 2003, so I was always worried that maybe that would come back. And I had a scan, and they discovered I had breast cancer. I developed lymphedema right away, which means that you don't have enough lymph nodes in the affected limb, and lymph fluid can back up in your arms. So it was really, really a bad time, and recovering from the surgery was bad. I just didn't think I would ever work again. I just thought, this is it. I'm tired, I'm exhausted, I'm fed up with everything. I was pissed off, angry at everybody. I didn't even know where to go to get the treatment for lymphedema. And one of my surgeons looked up and found a woman named Dr. Emily Eicher. And I went to her and told her this sad story. And she's this very charming, very petite Czechoslovakian woman. And she said in this accent, which I will attempt badly, she said, darling, that's all in the past. Now you will have a glass of champagne, and you will begin the rest of your life. And she had that thing that some doctors have, which is just their vibe is healing. And it felt like all of that negativity just fell away. So I went and met with Ryan Murphy, and in that meeting, it's like that little kid that I talked about before. Suddenly that little kid woke up, the one that had been beat over the head with the cancellation and the cancer, and just jumped up inside and like ran around the room. And I got so excited about it, and that was the beginning of Coven. That was Madame LaLaurie, and she was a real person, so I loved studying her. And at that time, I didn't know what the premise of the story was. I didn't know they were going to be kind of like a rep company, and you got to play different parts every season. I got to work with Gabby Sidibe and Jessica and Sarah Paulson and Franny Conroy and just these amazing gals. And then I got to go to the next season and the season after that, and Ryan really brought my career into my third act with a bang. So I owe him a lot. I really do. I always will. And I will regret to my living days that I was so nervous at the Emmys when I won that I neglected to thank him. I was all about the crew, you know.
Thank you all so very much.
I just forgot to thank Ryan, and he was very upset, and he was right to be upset. And he's gotten over it now, but I don't know if I ever will. Yes, we're thanking Ryan Murphy here. Thank you, Ryan.
My son is innocent. Mr. President, please clear my son's name.
I didn't know much about the bombing of the Olympics in 1996. When I read the script and I started to do the research, I was horrified at what had happened to Richard Jewell. They made fun of him, horrible headlines, horrible. I mean, as an actor, even a sentence in a review can just go right to my heart, and I'll never forget it. But I could never imagine being the subject of these horrible headlines. I sat with Bobby and researched with her for a long time and taped her voice, and she got very emotional several times. It's still very raw in her. I'm not always able to choose something that's going to fill me with joy, and I think it's going to be this magnificent film. And in a lot of ways with Richard Jewell, I told Clint, who it's been an incredible honor to work with, and he's 89 and he's so damn sexy and just great to work with. You have a real freedom with him on set. And I won the National Board of Review, and this is all happening so fast. And I told Clint, I said, I've been in this business 50 years, but I finally feel like I hit the big time. My goal was to tell people that he was a hero, to be able to have that part in such something you can do for somebody, a real person, to change, hopefully change something in their lives. It's just such a gift. You don't get the opportunity to do that as an actor. Everything you do, you want it to be just great, and you want it to be the best you can be. I always reach for the best I can do, and I guess it's that elusive carrot that hangs in front of all of us as we're trying to pursue that passion and that goal.